Imagine for a second, you take a flawless 100-mile-per-hour badminton smash technique,
Right.
and you step up to a tennis baseline, you toss a heavy felt ball into the air, and you execute that exact same swing.
Oh, man. Well, you won't just hit a bad shot.
No.
No, you're going to hit the ball completely out of the stadium. I mean, it will clear the service box, clear the baseline, and likely just embed itself in the back fence.
That is just wild to visualize.
And the wildest part is that this failure, it has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of athleticism or, a lack of power.
Right, because the swing was perfect.
Exactly. It has entirely to do with the fact that the aerodynamics and really the immutable laws of physics have quietly changed the rules of the universe the moment you stepped onto a different court.
It's like you're playing a completely different game of physics.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up a massive, incredibly detailed stack of notes that dissects all of this.
It really is a biomechanical culture shock. It is. And we're diving into the biomechanics, the physics, and the tactical collisions between tennis and badminton. 'Cause if you were listening to this, you've probably experienced that frustrating moment, right? Where your brain knows exactly what it wants your body to do.
But your muscles just completely betray you.
Yes, exactly. So our mission today is to decode exactly why the muscle memory you've spent years building in one racket sport can just utterly sabotage you in another.
And it really comes down to looking under the hood of human anatomy, you know?
Yeah, to understand how mastering these underlying physics can actually upgrade your game on either court.
So to unpack this properly, we really have to establish the fundamental divergence that dictates, every single swing, every step, every tactical decision we're going to talk about today.
The core metaphor, basically.
Right. It all comes down to a negotiation with mass. In tennis, you're manipulating a racket that weighs roughly 300 grams.
Okay, 300 grams.
And you are attempting to violently alter the trajectory of a ball that weighs about 57 grams.
Which, that sounds relatively light on paper.
Yeah.
Until you factor in velocity and leverage.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you're swinging 300 grams at the end of a 27-inch lever, trying to reverse the momentum of a 57-gram object that's flying at you at like 80 miles an hour.
It changes the math completely.
It requires a heavy machinery approach. You can't just, flick your wrist at it. You have to build this massive full-body momentum and transfer your entire center of gravity into the collision.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. Heavy machinery. You're essentially using the largest muscles in your body as a coordinated engine to move a boulder.
Right.
But now, apply that exact same framework to badminton.
The mass is totally different.
Completely. The racket is incredibly light, hovering around an almost imperceptible 80 grams.
Wow, 80 grams.
Yeah, and the shuttlecock is a mere 5 grams.
5 grams.
Exactly. So that heavy machinery model we just talked about, it becomes entirely obsolete. Badminton is all about achieving this whip-like terminal velocity.
So it's not a bulldozer, it's a whip.
Yes. You are trying to create micro-movements, explosive acceleration, and just a supersonic snap at the very end of a kinetic chain.
So if I use the heavy machinery of a tennis swing to hit a 5-gram shuttlecock, it's like trying to swat a fly with a sledgehammer.
That's a great analogy.
Right, because I'm expending massive amounts of energy, but I'm just way too slow to actually catch the target.
And on the flip side, if you try to use those hyper-fast whip mechanics of badminton to return a heavy tennis serve...
The heavy ball just absorbs all that flimsy force.
Exactly. It bends your racket backward and sends all that shock straight down into your arm.
Ouch. Okay, so this clash of physical realities, then note say it's most apparent when we look at the core of the body, the engine room.
Yes, the core is where it all starts.
Yeah.
Let's look at a trap that the sources highlight, one that, almost every single tennis beginner falls into.
Oh, the verbal cue.
Yes, the cue to, quote-unquote, turn your upper body or turn your shoulders.
Which instructors say constantly, by the way.
They do. But from a strictly biomechanical standpoint, it is a highly dangerous illusion.
But wait, if I think about my anatomy, my arms are attached to my shoulders, right? My eyes are looking straight ahead.
Right.
So naturally, if I want to bring a racket backward to prepare for a swing, my brain says, twist the shoulders back.
It feels intuitive, but the sources are arguing that the shoulders and the chest are strictly passive followers in this equation. The hips and the pelvis, they have to be the active initiators.
The active initiators.
Okay.
Okay, why is turn the shoulders so bad then?
The problem with cueing the shoulders is that it completely ignores the structural reality of the human spine.
Okay, let's dissect the torso.
So, your thoracic spine, that's the section of your back attached to your rib cage, it actually has a very limited capacity for rotation.
Because the ribs lock it in place.
Exactly. It's locked into a relatively stable cage. And then below that is your lumbar spine, your lower back.
Right, which we all know can get injured easily.
Because the facet joints in those lumbar vertebrae, they are oriented in a way that allows for flexion and extension.
Meaning bending forward and backward?
Yes, but they severely restrict twisting.
Okay, so if I lock my hips facing forward and I try to aggressively muscle the racket back just by twisting my chest and shoulders.
You are basically fighting your own skeleton.
Wow. I am forcing my lumbar spine to act as a pivot point for a twisting motion it was, like evolutionarily designed to prevent.
You're wringing out your lower back like a wet towel.
Oh, that sounds painful.
By keeping the hips static, you turn the lumbar spine into this rigid anchor point, and the shearing forces generated by trying to twist that heavy upper body against a fixed lower body.
It creates immense stress.
Immense stress on the discs and ligaments. It's basically a recipe for severe squeezing and twisting injuries. You are demanding a range of motion that anatomically just does not exist.
Okay, let's unpack this. The power generation, it has to start lower. It has to start where we made contact with the earth.
The kinetic chain.
Exactly. If I push off the ground, the hips act as the central hub, right? Transferring that ground reaction force up into the body. The notes call this the unit turn.
Yes, the unit turn is the conscious, explicit rotation of the waist and the hips.
So turning everything together.
Right. When you turn the pelvis as a single solid block, it naturally drags the spine, the shoulders, and the racket backward without requiring any twisting of that fragile lower back.
It aligns the body safely. I see where this leads to power, too. It's like twisting a thick rubber band.
Exactly like that.
If I only twist the top half, my shoulders, I just get painful tension in the middle. But if I anchor the bottom, twist the sturdy base of my hips forward toward the net, and let my upper body lag behind for a fraction of a second.
That time delay is everything. It stretches the massive muscles of the core.
And the sources call that core torque, right?
Yes. That slight built-in time delay, right before the heavy upper body catches up to the hips, it creates this massive reservoir of elastic potential energy in the obliques and the abdominal wall.
So when that stretched rubber band finally uncoils,
the rotational velocity transferred to the shoulder and then out to the racket is immense. It actually requires very little conscious effort from the arm muscles themselves.
the core's uncoiling just does the heavy lifting.
Exactly.
Okay, so the hips are the engine, the core provides the torque. But here's the paradox I found in the notes.
Okay, let's hear it.
If that biomechanical logic is an absolute law of human anatomy, why do our sources highlight such a massive difference in how the hips are actually used in badminton?
Right.
Because if I'm visualizing a badminton smash, the player isn't grinding through this long, heavy horizontal rotation like a tennis forehand.
Well, the fundamental logic of the kinetic chain, that energy moves from the ground up, that remains intact.
Okay.
However, the application of that energy has to radically shift because the plane of rotation and the mass of the tools are entirely different.
Because tennis is mostly horizontal.
Right. You are rotating on a relatively flat plane at chest or waist height to push a heavy mass through space.
But
Badminton, especially when we talk about power generation, is an aerial, vertical game.
So the geometry of the hip movement actually changes.
Yes.
When a badminton player goes up for a smash, they are stepping back. And the notes describe this really specific asymmetric locking of the hip.
They create a severe backward arch in the spine.
And then they explosively thrust the right hip forward and upward into the air.
Think of it this way. In tennis, the hips are the main thruster.
Right, for that heavy machinery.
They require a long, high-torque turn to slowly build momentum. But in badminton, because the racket is only 80 grams, you don't need a slow, grinding thruster.
It would be too slow.
Exactly. The hips act as the fuse of the whip chain.
The fuse. I like that.
It is a hyper-fast, incredibly short, upward pelvic rotation. The sole purpose of that sudden pelvic thrust is to aggressively fling the chest forward.
And then the chest flings the elbow.
Yes, the elbow violently throws the forearm, and that culminating energy whips the wrist and fingers into a terminal crack at the shuttlecock.
So it's the heavy machinery versus the whip. The tennis player is using their hips to push a stalled car, and the badminton player is using their hips to initiate the snap of a wet towel.
That is a perfect visualization.
Which brings us to a really fascinating tactical contradiction in the sources.
The stick smash.
Yes. We just established that turning the hips, whether it's the long grind of a tennis stroke or the explosive fuse of a badminton smash, is this non-negotiable law of power generation.
Right.
Yet, the notes highlight this technique in badminton called the stick smash, where elite players routinely hit lightning-fast drives and smashes while completely facing the net.
They don't turn their hips at all.
They don't. They are breaking the fundamental law we literally just established.
They are breaking the law of physics, but they are doing it to solve a brutal equation involving time.
Time versus power.
Exactly. The stick smash, or the frontal smash, is a scenario where tactics just override maximum biomechanical efficiency. It forces us to look at the time cost of human movement.
So if you're listening and wondering why a professional athlete would intentionally sacrifice power, think about the processing speed required in a fast, flat badminton exchange.
It's incredibly fast.
The notes state that executing a full turn, so stepping back, locking the hips, rotating the core, and following through that, takes roughly 0.3 to 0.5 seconds.
And in the context of a 100-mile-per-hour exchange at the net, half a second is an eternity.
It's a lifetime.
Consider the neurology of what is actually happening in that 0.5 seconds. Light hits the retina, the visual cortex processes the trajectory of the shuttlecock,
The motor cortex formulates a swing path.
and the electrical signal travels down the spinal cord to initiate the hip rotation. By the time that entire sequence completes and the hips finally turn to generate maximum power,
The shuttlecock has already dropped below the player's shoulder
exactly, they lose the downward angle.
because it's too low to smash aggressively.
Right, so they make a calculated trade-off. They intentionally keep their hips squared to the net, totally skipping the core rotation.
Which means they are willingly sacrificing, what, about 30% of their absolute raw power.
About 30%, yes. But by skipping that 0.5-second rotation, they buy back crucial fractions of a second.
And buying back that time allows them to strike the shuttlecock at the absolute highest possible point in its arc.
They maintain a steep downward trajectory, which suffocates the opponent's reaction time.
But this leaves a massive mechanical void. If you remove the hips from the kinetic chain, you still have to generate enough force to hit a lethal shot. You can't just tap it.
This is where the biomechanical substitutions come into play. And I have to stress, these are only possible because the racket weighs 80 grams.
Right, try this with a tennis racket, and you're not getting far. So since they can't twist, the notes say they use a core isometric hold.
The muscles aren't stretching and uncoiling like a rubber band anymore. They are firing aggressively just to stay perfectly still.
So the core becomes as rigid as concrete.
It acts as a fixed, immovable fulcrum. Without the torso rotating, the player utilizes an aggressive, localized stretching of the pectoral muscles across the chest. Oh, so just the chest stretching back.
Right, and from that rigid base, they unleash a hyper-fast sequence. The chest snaps the upper arm, but the real magic happens from the elbow down.
The notes mention extreme forearm pronation and finger power. And for anyone trying to visualize pronation, it's the inward rotation of your forearm.
Just think of holding your hand out, palm up.
Yeah, palm up, and then you rotate your wrist so your palm faces the floor. That rotation of the two bones in your forearm, that is pronation.
And in badminton, that rotation happens with violent speed. Combine that with finger power.
Which is just squeezing the grip tightly with the fingers, right?
At the absolute last microsecond before impact, yes. Because the racket is practically weightless, the rapid pronation and the sudden clenching of the fingers can accelerate the racket head from 0 to over 100 miles per hour in a fraction of a second.
So they are manufacturing lethal power entirely from the elbow down.
Entirely.
And the psychological advantage of this is immense, isn't it? Deception.
Oh, it's brilliant. If I wind up my hips and turn my back to you, my body language is literally screaming that a massive smash is coming.
You can brace for it.
But if I am standing perfectly square to the net, using that rigid isometric hold, my intentions are completely cloaked.
Out of that exact same square stance, you could squeeze your fingers for a bullet stick smash, you could softly tap it for a drop shot, or you could push it deep.
Your brain has zero physical tells to read. You are frozen.
It perfectly illustrates how technique must scale to the environment. In tennis, because of the heavy mass, turning the hips is an unbreakable law.
If you don't turn, you physically cannot propel the ball over the net with any meaningful pace.
But in badminton, turning the hips is a flexible tactical dial. You adjust your physics based entirely on the speed of the incoming shot and the time deficit you are facing.
Man, that concept of a time deficit seamlessly bridges us to the next massive pitfall in our notes. Part 3, the front lines.
The volley.
Yes, because if a half-second deficit forces badminton players to abandon their hips at the baseline, imagine what happens when a tennis player moves up to the net for a volley.
It's chaos.
The notes point out that the most common, practically universal instinct for a beginner at the net is to take a massive swing at the ball.
It is a biomechanical disaster driven by baseline habits. The fundamental truth that every tennis player must drill into their nervous system is that a volley is not a swing.
It is a quote-unquote block and punch.
Yes. When you are standing 3 feet from the net and your opponent crushes a passing shot from the baseline, that heavy ball is crossing the distance to you in roughly 0.3 to 0.5 seconds.
There's that exact same time window again, half a second.
Yes, but the mass is different. In badminton, you skip the hips but still aggressively whip the arm to generate speed. In a tennis volley, if you initiate a backswing, taking the racket back behind your shoulders.
The ball is already past your body before your arm can even begin its forward trajectory.
You simply run out of time.
And beyond just the time constraint, swinging a racket creates an unsolvable geometric problem, doesn't it?
It does. As your arm swings in an arc, the racket face is constantly changing its angle and its position in space.
So if I only have a third of a second to intercept a sphere moving at 80 miles an hour, trying to perfectly time a moving racket face to meet a moving ball in an exact millimeter of space.
It is mathematically improbable. You are introducing unnecessary variables into a crisis situation.
And the result is inevitably hitting the frame of the racket or making contact a millisecond too late when the racket face is open, sending the ball into the fence.
The architecture of the block and punch is designed to eliminate those moving variables entirely. It starts with preparation discipline. There is almost zero backswing.
The rule of thumb here in the notes is that the racket head must stay within your peripheral vision at all times.
If you lose sight of the racket head, you've pulled it too far back.
Right. So the preparation is nothing more than that slight unit turn of the shoulders we talked about earlier, presenting an open, stable racket face to the incoming ball.
And the strike itself is a forward punch. But the critical distinction here is the power source.
Right, because it's not the arm.
Exactly. 90% of the power in a penetrating tennis volley does not come from your arm. It comes from shifting your body weight forward.
You are stepping into the shot.
You are essentially turning your entire body mass into a collision course with the ball.
See, I want to dig into the mechanics of that step, because the notes draw a very sharp line between stomping your foot and stepping in.
That's a huge difference.
If I'm using my body weight, why does it matter how my foot hits the floor?
It is the difference in how kinetic energy is channeled. Imagine your forward momentum is water flowing rapidly through a horizontal pipe.
Okay, horizontal pipe.
If you lunge forward and violently stomp your front foot downward onto the court, you are driving all your kinetic energy vertically into the ground.
The energy stops at the floor.
Yes. Your forward momentum breaks.
So the pipe just hits a dead end.
Exactly. But if you step in, smoothly moving your center of mass forward through space as your foot plants, that kinetic energy continues to travel horizontally.
Oh, I get it.
You want the mass of your body to travel horizontally through the ball. The arm simply holds the racket in place as a bumper, while the chest and the front foot drive the collision.
So you are a moving wall.
Yes.
And to be a solid wall, the notes are very specific about the state of the wrist. It must be a firm L shape. Now, if I hear locked wrist, my brain immediately imagines playing like a stiff, unathletic robot.
Right, which you don't want.
Because I'd lose all my touch and all the shock of the ball would just rattle right up into my elbow.
And that is the danger of misinterpreting the cue. We must differentiate between stiff and firm.
Okay, what's the difference?
If your arm is stiff, meaning every muscle from the forearm to the shoulder is clenched at maximum capacity, you do lose your feel, and the joint becomes brittle against the impact. What the volley requires is a firm wrist with elastic tension.
It's the difference between clenching your fist in anger versus holding your hands up to brace yourself against a heavy oak door that someone is trying to push open.
That's a really good way to put it.
Your wrist is in a stable, locked position. It isn't flopping backward, but the muscles aren't rigidly maxed out. They are engaged, springy, and ready to absorb and transfer force.
That L shape, keeping the racket head up above the wrist, provides the structural integrity necessary to withstand the collision of a heavy tennis ball without the racket face collapsing upon impact.
Which brings us back to badminton. Contrast that heavy braith door with the mechanics of a badminton net lift or an underhand clear.
It's night and day.
The tennis volley is a moving steel wall designed to block fast incoming fire. The badminton lift is a whip's tail.
Because the context is entirely different. In a badminton net lift, the shuttlecock has typically dropped below the level of the net.
So I'm not blocking a fast horizontal projectile.
No, you are trying to dig a dead 5-gram object out from near the floor and fling it high and deep to the back line.
I can't just put up a wall. A wall won't make a stationary object fly upward.
Right, you cannot rely on the opponent's pace. And because you are lunging downward, you cannot step forward through the shot to use your body weight like in tennis.
So you have to manufacture all the terminal velocity yourself.
This requires a completely relaxed, almost floppy wrist that suddenly locks precisely at the point of contact.
It's that extreme forearm pronation and supination again, combined with a violent flick of the wrist.
Exactly. If you try to use your firm L-shaped tennis wrist to dig out a badminton shuttlecock, your arm will just stiffly push the shuttlecock 2 feet into the air, and your opponent will immediately smash it down your throat.
The physics basically demand the whip.
Yes. But that firm L-shaped wrist we built for the tennis volley, it isn't just for surviving at the net.
No, the notes reveal that this exact same structural integrity is the foundational secret for one of the most elegant, highly tactical shots played from the baseline. Part 4. The art of the slice.
The backhand slice.
The backhand slice is a masterpiece of spin and control. But before we dissect how to hit it, the notes require us to differentiate between two very different intentions. We have the slicing lob and the backhand slice, which is an underspin drive.
The intention completely changes the geometry of the swing. The slicing lob is primarily a defensive desperation shot.
Imagine you are pushed 10 feet behind the baseline, stretched out at a full sprint on your backhand side.
You strike the ball with a steep upward trajectory, aiming high and deep into the opponent's court, but you load the ball with incredibly heavy backspin.
The backspin is essentially a booby trap, right?
Absolutely. A normal high ball would bounce forward, allowing the opponent to rush in and hit an overhead. But because of the heavy backspin, when the slicing lob finally hits the court, it stalls.
The spin grabs the friction of the court surface.
And the ball sits up vertically or even kicks backward. It completely destroys the timing of an opponent trying to close the net.
Now, the backhand slice drive, conversely, is an offensive or neutral shot hit with a much flatter driving trajectory.
Right, because of the backspin, it stays incredibly low as it crosses the net, skids fast upon hitting the ground,
and forces the opponent to dig the ball up from around their shoelaces, preventing them from hitting an aggressive topspin reply.
So to physically produce this skidding ball, the notes dictate a strict set of mechanical rules. First, the grip.
It must be a strictly continental grip, also known as bevel number 2. For anyone holding a racket, this is the hammer grip.
The thin edge of the racket frame is pointing straight at the ground, not the flat string bed.
This grip naturally creates an open racket face. The strings are pointing slightly upward toward the sky.
And that open face is mandatory for carving under the bottom of the ball to generate the backspin.
Got it.
The next non-negotiable rule is the stance. You must use a closed or semi-closed stance.
Meaning you step your front foot completely across your body, turning your chest and shoulders entirely sideways to the net.
Keeping the body completely sideways solves a major tracking issue. If your chest opens up to face the net during the swing, your shoulder joint dictates that your arm will naturally swing in a circular, sweeping arc around your body.
And that circular path will pull the ball wide.
Exactly. By locking your body sideways, your shoulder joint acts as a linear hinge, allowing the racket to travel in a perfectly straight track down the target line.
And that track, the notes describe it as high to low to forward. The racket starts high above the shoulder and swings down toward the ball. But the most fatal beginner flaw is stopping at the high to low phase.
Right. If you just chop downward on the ball like you have an axe, your racket strings only intersect the path of the ball for a fraction of a millisecond.
All of your kinetic energy is driven straight into the ground.
The result is a weak, floaty ball that usually hits the bottom of the net.
So the secret is the forward extension.
The racket must carve under the ball, but then the arm must extend forcefully forward through the contact zone, driving toward the target long after the ball has left the strings.
You are not just chopping downward. You are using the mass of your shoulder and your forward step to plow through the mass of the heavy ball. It is a driving, penetrating force.
Which brings up, honestly, the most fascinating biomechanical quirk in this entire document.
Oh, the wing spread. I love this part.
It's so cool. To effectively drive the racket forward on a backhand slice, you actually have to throw your non-hitting arm, your left arm, violently backward, away from the ball and away from the net.
Which just sounds so crazy. Throwing half my body weight in the opposite direction of my target seems entirely counterintuitive. Until you look at the physics of centrifugal force.
Centrifugal force is the silent enemy of the straight swing track.
Okay, explain that.
When your right arm swings forward rapidly on that high to low to forward path, the mass of your arm, combined with the 300-gram racket, creates immense rotational momentum.
And that momentum wants to pull your right shoulder forward.
Exactly, which will inevitably spin your chest open to the net, ruining the linear track we just talked about.
So, by violently throwing my left arm backward, at the exact millisecond I swing my right arm forward, I am creating an equal and opposite counterforce.
You are using your left arm as a counterweight to anchor your torso.
It locks my chest sideways, ensuring the hitting arm stays perfectly on its straight track and the ball flies like a laser.
It's the exact same physics as a tightrope walker holding a long horizontal pole to prevent their body from twisting off balance.
It is just a beautiful mechanical solution, and if we look for the badminton crossover here, it is yet again the exact opposite.
Yes, a badminton backhand clear from the deep court relies entirely on the whip.
It is a loose, flicking wrist, heavy forearm supination, popping the shuttlecock upward with maximum acceleration and absolutely zero backspin.
The tennis slice demands rigid structural integrity to plow through mass. The badminton clear demands fluid snap to defeat time.
Wow. Okay, we've spent a lot of time analyzing how to hit this beautiful skidding slice or how to put up a defensive lob. Let's flip the perspective. What happens when you are the player receiving that lob?
Part 5. The aerial assault. The overhead smash.
The notes reveal a stark warning here. If you bring your elite badminton jump smash habits to a tennis overhead, you are setting yourself up for catastrophic joint pain.
Oh, it is the most efficient way to develop severe tennis elbow or wrist tendonitis.
Really?
Yeah. Applying the whip mechanics of a badminton smash to a tennis overhead causes intense vibrational shock to the arm and guarantees a massive failure rate in actually hitting the court.
And the root cause of this failure, interestingly, is a spatial error that plagues both sports, but manifests entirely differently based on the mass of the projectile.
A late contact point.
Striking the object when it is too far behind your body.
The biomechanical chain reaction of a late hit always begins with poor footwork. You see the lob go up, but instead of rapidly moving your feet backward, you simply tilt your head back and track it with your eyes.
Right, you just stand there looking up.
Because your body didn't retreat, the ball's arc carries it over you. You find yourself standing directly beneath the falling object, or worse, the object is dropping slightly behind the plane of your head.
Let's look at the badminton penalty first.
Yeah.
If I am tracking a 5-gram shuttlecock and it gets by my head, what happens when I swing?
Because you are relying on that hyper-fast terminal wrist snap to generate power, timing is everything.
Right.
If the shuttle is behind you, your racket face hasn't had the time to travel through its arc and close downward over the top of the shuttle.
So at the point of contact behind your head, the racket strings are still pointing up toward the ceiling.
You hit a weak, flat shot that flies long. Alternatively, your brain realizes the shuttle is behind you, and you try to artificially compensate by violently yanking your wrist downward to force the angle.
And you smash it straight into the bottom of the net.
Exactly. But because the shuttlecock is practically weightless, the penalty is purely tactical. You lose the point, but your arm doesn't hurt.
Ah. But if I make that exact same spatial error in tennis with a heavy ball,
The physical penalty is severe. If the 57-gram ball is dropping behind your head, your arm is cramped and awkwardly bent at the elbow.
you cannot fully extend the lever of your arm.
And the large muscles of your chest, core, and legs are designed to absorb the shock of a heavy collision. But when you strike a heavy ball outside of your sweet spot with a bent, cramped arm, you completely bypass those large muscle groups.
So the massive counterforce of the collision has nowhere to go.
Right, so it violently rattles the delicate hinge joints of your wrist and your elbow. You are essentially punching a brick wall with a bent arm.
It's biomechanical self-sabotage. So the fix has to be entirely spatial. We have to correct the geometry before the swing ever happens.
The notes say it starts from the ground up, crossover steps or side steps. Never stand flat-footed and never backpedal on your heels, which throws you off balance.
You have to rapidly move behind the anticipated landing spot of the ball so that you can transfer your weight by moving forward into the strike.
And to help track that landing spot, the sources highlight the left-hand radar.
Pointing your non-dominant hand up at the falling ball.
This isn't just a stylistic quirk for balance. It forces your shoulders to turn sideways, preparing the torso for the kinetic chain, and it gives your brain a physical, tactile reference point in space to accurately judge the ball's depth and speed.
Which brings us to the golden rule of spatial awareness from the notes. I love this visualization. If the ball were to drop, it should land in front of your toes, not hit you on the nose.
That mental model is perfect. The ideal contact point for a tennis overhead is approximately 15 to 30 centimeters in front of your hitting shoulder.
Striking the ball out in front allows your arm to extend fully, creating a rigid, powerful lever.
Crucially, it allows your forward momentum, your body weight, to transfer completely through the ball, safely absorbing the shock of the heavy collision into your core and your legs, protecting your arm.
Now, if the overhead smash requires a spatial rewiring, the notes suggest that the actual serve is where the physics of these two sports undergo the most dramatic, irreconcilable clash of the entire deep dive.
Part 6. The opening salvo.
Yes. If you stand on the baseline, toss a tennis ball into the air, and swing with a flawless badminton smash technique, the ball will fly out of bounds every single time.
And this is not a matter of hitting it too hard. This is purely a matter of aerodynamics and geometry. We have to look at how these two very different objects interact with the air molecules around them.
Okay, let's break down the aerodynamics of the shuttlecock first. A shuttlecock is basically an aerodynamic anomaly.
It is designed to have massive drag. The cone shape of the feathers catches the air like a parachute.
When a badminton player smashes a shuttlecock incredibly flat and hard, it explodes off the racket face, but that massive drag instantly kicks in.
The air resistance rapidly decelerates the shuttlecock and sharply pulls its trajectory downward into the court. The drag does the work of keeping the shot in bounds.
Now consider the tennis ball. It is relatively dense, heavy, and spherical. Even with the felt, it has minimal drag compared to a feathered cone. It cuts efficiently through the air.
If you hit a flat tennis serve, meaning you strike directly on the back of the ball with no spin, that ball is going to travel in a linear path for a very long time before gravity eventually pulls it down.
It's a cannonball versus a parachute.
Exactly.
And the notes provide a fascinating mathematical breakdown of why the cannonball is such a problem given the geometry of a tennis court.
The math here is mind-blowing. If a player who is 1.9 meters tall, about 6'2", hits a completely flat serve, striking the ball at the absolute highest reach of their extended arm, they have to hit the ball over a 3-foot net and have it drop inside a service box that is 21 feet away.
The geometrical window to thread that needle over the net but inside the line, relying solely on gravity and a flat trajectory, is an incredibly tiny 1 to 2 degrees of margin.
A 1 to 2 degree window.
That's nothing. If your wrist is angled a single millimeter too far forward, the ball hits the tape of the net.
If your racket face is open by a fraction of a degree, the ball sails past the service line.
And that is for a tall player. If you are shorter, say 5'8", that geometric window mathematically drops to 0 degrees.
It becomes physically impossible to hit a flat serve from baseline to service box without clipping the net.
So, we cannot rely on gravity, we cannot rely on drag, to force that heavy, fast-moving cannonball to dive down into the service box. We have to manipulate fluid dynamics.
We have to utilize the Magnus effect.
The Magnus effect. Let's really paint a picture of this for you, the listener, because it is the closest thing to magic in sports physics.
To create the Magnus effect, you cannot hit the ball flat. You must brush up the back of the ball, imparting heavy topspin or slice.
As the ball flies forward through the air, it is simultaneously spinning rapidly forward.
The felt on the tennis ball grabs a thin layer of air molecules and drags them along with its rotation. This is called the boundary layer.
So the ball is wrapped in a spinning layer of air as it crashes through the atmosphere.
Exactly. Now, because the ball is spinning forward, the top of the ball is rotating against the oncoming airstream.
And this collision slows the air down and creates an area of high pressure on top of the ball.
Conversely, the bottom of the ball is rotating with the oncoming airstream, accelerating the airflow and creating an area of low pressure underneath.
And nature abhors an imbalance.
Right. The high pressure on top physically pushes the ball down toward the low pressure area.
Furthermore, that spinning boundary layer grabs the wake of air behind the ball and deflects it upward.
By Newton's third law of motion, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. If the ball pushes the air up, the air must push the ball down.
This combined aerodynamic force physically shoves the ball downward at a rate much faster than gravity alone.
This is what allows a high-speed serve to safely clear the net by several feet and then violently dive down into the service box.
You are artificially bending the trajectory of the ball using air pressure. But to unlock this aerodynamic cheat code, you have to completely rewire your mechanics. You cannot use the flat-faced badminton grip.
The flat badminton forehand grip is useless here. You must revert to the tennis continental grip, holding the racket like a hammer on bevel 2.
Which feels incredibly unnatural to a beginner because as you swing up toward the ball, the thin edge of the racket frame is leading the swing, not the strings. It feels like you're going to hit the ball with the frame.
And the toss also has to adapt. In badminton, the shuttle is dropping directly over your head, but the notes say a tennis toss needs to be out into the court to your right front side if you are right-handed.
Tossing the heavy ball forward forces your body weight to launch up and out to chase it, transferring that mass into the shot.
Which brings us to the mental intent of the swing itself. This is perhaps the most difficult habit to break.
Yeah.
In badminton, your mental intent is to smash down on top of the shuttle. You are hammering a nail downward. But in tennis, the serve swings up and out.
You are not hitting down. You are dropping the racket head low behind your back, and you are swinging violently up toward the sky, brushing the back of the ball.
The physics of the spin will bring the ball down. If you swing down, you just hit the net.
And at the very peak of that upward swing, we don't use the badminton wrist snap.
The violent downward wrist snap of badminton would damage the wrist against the heavy tennis ball and totally kill the spin. Instead, we use pronation.
As your arm swings up and out, leading with the edge of the frame, your forearm aggressively rotates outward at the very last millisecond.
This rotation snaps the flat of the strings onto the ball to strike it, and then the arm continues rotating so the racket face ends up pointing outward, away from your body.
Pronation generates immense racket head speed, maximizes the spin for the Magnus effect, and safely decelerates the arm without straining the hinge of the wrist.
We have covered an immense biomechanical landscape today.
We really have. We started at the foundation, tracing the journey of power from the hips, uncovering why the core must be the torque engine, and why turning the shoulders is an anatomical trap.
We explored the calculated trade-offs of the stick smash, where elite players intentionally sacrifice power to defeat the brutal physics of a half-second time deficit.
We moved up to the net, contrasting the unyielding moving wall of the tennis volley with the terminal whip of the badminton lift.
We broke down the structural integrity of the backhand slice, spreading our wings as a counterweight against centrifugal force.
And finally, we decoded the complex spatial geometry of the overhead and the slow dynamics of the serve, trading the drag of a parachute for the Magnus effect of a spinning cannonball.
It is a profound exploration of how human anatomy must continuously adapt to manipulate the physical environment.
It completely shifts my perspective. The ultimate lesson from this deep dive isn't just a list of tips and tricks. It's the realization that technique is never just an arbitrary stylistic choice.
Right.
It is a strict, unforgiving negotiation with the physical mass of the objects you are manipulating, the aerodynamic properties of the tools in your hand, and the relentless constraints of time and gravity.
It is a negotiation with the universe itself. And reviewing all this data leaves me with one final, deeply provocative thought.
Oh, let's hear it.
We have spent this entire deep dive analyzing how to physically adjust our muscles, our skeletal alignment, and our center of gravity based on the mass of the racket and the ball.
Yeah.
But consider the cognitive load this places on the brain. If you are an athlete who regularly plays both of these sports, your brain is actively maintaining two completely distinct, highly complex internal physics engines.
Wow.
It has to calculate time, geometry, mass, and fluid dynamics entirely differently for each environment, and it has to switch between these two engines instantly, subconsciously, based on nothing more than the tactile feedback of holding an extra 200 grams in your hand.
That is a staggering level of neurological processing.
It really forces you to ask, how adaptable is human muscle memory really when the fundamental laws of aerodynamics and physics change the moment you walk through the gate onto a different court?
That is a phenomenal question to chew on. The brain operating as a quantum supercomputer, just so you can switch from Tuesday night badminton to Thursday morning tennis. To you listening, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive and bringing such an incredibly detailed, thoroughly analytical, and genuinely eye-opening stack of sources to the table. This deep dive has completely changed the way I will look at every single swing on either of those courts. Keep exploring, keep questioning the invisible sources of the world around you, and we will catch you next time you're ready to unpack something fascinating.